Good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Eichhoff, and serve as the Associate Director of Alumni Relations at John Carroll University. We are incredibly pleased that you've joined us tonight for our program focusing on the 1920 Cleveland Indians. Many Clevelanders know, and baseball fans know, that the 1920 season brought the first World Series championship to the Forest City. But this baseball season was one of triumph and tragedy for the Cleveland Indians. Tonight, we will learn more about one of the most memorable seasons in Major League Baseball history. We are incredibly fortunate that Bryan Fritz, class of 1975, and Ken Krsolovic, two authors of League Park, the historic home of the Cleveland Indians, 1891 to 1946, which focuses on the ballpark, which played host to many of Cleveland's earliest baseball memories. It is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speakers. Bryan Fritz, class of 75, recently retired after a nearly 41-year career as a senior prosecutor for the city of Cleveland. He earned his undergraduate degree from John Carroll and his law degree from Cleveland State's Marshall School of Law. This upcoming season marks the 40th season where Bryan will be the lead statistician for John Carroll football games. He also wrote a book on the history of John Carroll football and is finalizing one on Blue Streak basketball history. Ken Krsolovic is a career college athletic administrator and baseball coach who began his career in sports as a sports info director in John Carroll in the mid-1980s. Ken also has extensive experience in sports radio advertising and TV play-by-play and won multiple awards for writing and design of sports media guide publications. Finally, before we jump into Bryan and Ken's presentation, a quick note about tonight's program. At the conclusion of the moderated portion, you will have the opportunity to ask Bryan and Ken questions. Please use the chat feature to ask these questions. We will do our best to get to as many as possible. Additionally, please make sure you are on mute during tonight's program. We will be recording it for individuals who are not able to join us tonight, but were interested in learning more about the topic. It is now my pleasure to turn it over to Ken and Bryan. I'm turning over.
There we go.
There we go.
I was muted. All right. Thank you, Eric. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys. As Eric said, I began my career at John Carroll in the athletics department and coached baseball there as well as served as the sports information director, got involved in a lot of other things, coaching the club hockey team and some other stuff as well. Was advisor of the student publication. So it was really a great start to my career, and I really owe John Carroll a lot. I saved lots of memorabilia, including this circa mid-'80s John Carroll baseball cap. So I thought that was pretty appropriate for tonight.
And I'll be doing my stats for the John Carroll football team, except that it'll be in the spring instead of the fall.
So happy to be here. We have a PowerPoint presentation that we are going to share with you. Let me get that up for you. And I need to share my screen. So let's see here. Where is that on Zoom? I'm looking for that one. Yep. Here we go. Should be able to share screen. Here we go. Aha. Slideshow.
Right.
From beginning. All right. Can everyone see that? Are we good, Eric?
You're good.
We're all
Okay.
muted, so if we can't lie to you.
Should I shake this off? Okay. Eric, are we good? Can you see the screen? Are we all right?
You're good.
Okay. All right. Well, let's get rolling here. Of course, League Park is what Bryan and I wrote our book about, and certainly there are many stories related to League Park. And the season of 1920 is probably the most famous of them all. So we'll take you through that tonight and to give you a start. When you talk about 1920, you really have to go back to 1916. That's when the fellow in the middle there, Jim Dunn, purchased the team. He became the owner of the Indians. Sonny Jim Dunn, he was known as, purchased the team. Had just been named the Indians in 1915. He took over the ball club, which had really gone on bad times in 14 and 15. The emergence of the Federal League, a third major league, had caused a lot of financial problems for Charles Summers, the prior owner. So he got out. Dunn came in and pledged that he was going to make Cleveland a champion. So he opened with some fanfare there in 1916. This is actually a shot from opening day. Him and some other notable folks, politicians and whatnot, from the front row of the upper deck on that first day.
And you like the headdress?
They handed out those headdresses to all the fans that day. So political correctness on Indians was far from things at that time. The first thing that Dunn did was he made a big acquisition, and this is the acquisition. I love this shot. It's colorized, obviously. This is Tris Speaker. And Tris was brought over from Boston. He was in a contract dispute with the Red Sox. And Tris was acquired by Cleveland, was a superstar outfielder. I like this shot not only because it's colorized, but it also shows what Tris did. It's a spring training shot, but he was known for his shallow center field play. He actually turned 4 unassisted double plays from center field during his career. He was so fast. He would play shallow. He knew he could get back on balls. And because he would play shallow, he would often be able to cut a ball off that was about to get to the top of the grass. He would charge in, be able to cut that ball off, thinking it was a sure hit. A runner at second would take off. Tris would just continue to run in and tag second and double off the runner from second base. So he was not only one of the greatest hitters of all time, he's still the all-time doubles leader with 792 doubles in his career. But also one of the top triples hitters of all time and one of the top average hitters of all time. So Tris Speaker was the big acquisition that really kicked things off for Jim Dunn and his newly owned ball club here in Cleveland. Speaker became the manager by the time the Indians, by the time the 20 season had come around. And he had loaded up a pretty good pitching staff, and I'll let Bryan talk about that.
Yeah, the Cleveland team really got good because their pitching staff was so good. They'd been second place the year before, so their pitching staff carried them through the year. This is Stan Kovaleski, Hall of Famer, and he won 24 games in 1919, came back in 1920, won 24 games. He was a right-handed pitcher, pitched 14 years in the majors, and ended up with 215 wins. So he was one of the star pitchers of the team, and one of the reasons why Cleveland got to be that good.
There was one bit of tragedy early in the 1920 season.
Right.
Kovaleski's wife had died. Everybody knows about the tragedy with Cleveland shortstop Ray Chapman, but they had undergone some turmoil earlier in the year when Kovaleski's wife died in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, she'd been sick for a while, but then her death was certainly unexpected. The big man for the Indians in 1920 was Jim Bagby. And Bagby was a right-handed pitcher as well. He'd won 17 games the year before. And in 1920, if they were giving a Cy Young Award, he would have won it. He went 31-12, led the league in game starts, complete games, all kinds of things. Had an earned run average under 3, and was certainly the warhorse of the Cleveland pitching staff that year, and was one of the main reasons why they were able to get into the World Series despite the tragedies they had. This is the third man in the rotation, Ray Caldwell. Caldwell had been picked up the year before. He had been on Boston, went to New York, traded him to Cleveland. Caldwell had a drinking problem. So they still picked him up. He did okay. In 1920, he ended up winning 20 games as the third starter. But actually, one of the most fascinating things about Ray Caldwell was the first game he pitched for Cleveland, and that was in 1919. He comes in, he starts the game, 2 out in the ninth at League Park. He gets hit by lightning. He ends up falling off the mound, and being that it was 1919, they waited a little bit. He dusted himself off, and he finished the game and won the game. But he still was a good pitcher. He had his best year in the majors in 1920 when he won 20 games. After that, he ended up going 6-6 the following year.
Okay. Here's one of our favorite things to show. This is a compilation of film from the 1920 season. This is the outside League Park. I'll try and walk you through this with some of the clips as we go here. Those of you that may have seen our prior presentation on the history of League Park, we used this film then. But this is actually from the 1920 season. It's part of a film that was a short film that was distributed around the country. Babe Ruth had taken storm of the country, being traded to the New York Yankees for 1920, started hitting prodigious home runs and became the talk of not only baseball, but really the entertainment world. And so when the Yankees came to Cleveland, I guess it was in June, their first trip in that year, there was a company that had followed the Yankees to make about a 10-minute film. And again, these are the highlights of that film and really the most important things that pertain to Cleveland and League Park. So let's take a look here. And you can see the crowds outside.
Okay. Sometimes we get the film that freezes. Ken?
We're going to try to figure out the technological issues real quick. 1 sec. Just give it 1 second.
Okay. They had some really big games with the Yankees. They ended up putting extra seats in the outfield standing room behind ropes. They had some of their biggest crowds, like 30,000 people, in a park that seated a little over 20,000.
Bryan, can you talk, while Ken's hopefully joining us back, can you talk a little about that building that was right in front? What is that building? And I don't know if Ken's going to do that, but do you mind talking a little bit more about that part?
Sure, not a problem. The building you saw in that picture was, that was where the tickets were sold on the lower level, and the upper part was the Cleveland Indians offices. That building was built in 1909, actually the year before they redid the stadium. That building is still there. That is now home to the Baseball Heritage Museum at League Park. So if you ever get the chance to go down there, they have a nice little museum inside, and you can walk around. There's a lot of interesting exhibits about the Negro Leagues, about League Park, and just all baseball history. So that's pretty cool. In 1920, the park seated probably about 23,000, 23,000, and they would draw certainly big crowds for the Yankees or the White Sox, who were the other big teams, but they didn't have lights. So back then, nobody had lights. But during the season, you would get the big games, and they would draw the 20, 30,000 people for the big games. 1920, as the season went along, the White Sox had won the year before. Cleveland was still in the running because of their pitching staff and because of the speaker and some of the others. And I see a note from Ken saying his screen is causing a problem. So we'll keep talking about this for a little bit. But and he's trying to get back on. So some of the other players, Steve O'Neill was the catcher. Doc Johnston they had on the team, Jim Graney. Wamsgans was in the infield with Chapman. And they still had some of the other pitchers they had too were George Ewell and Guy Morton. Ewell was at the beginning of his career. Morton was a so-so pitcher who was late in his career. And in 1920, the pennant race was coming down to the Yankees, the White Sox, and the Indians. The White Sox had won before, and that was the year of the Black Sox scandal. So they were still a very good team. The Yankees had obtained Babe Ruth, and so they were getting good. So they had some really talented people there, and the team was getting much better, and so it was a matter of Cleveland had to be good at the right time. And we're still working on these. Let's see. Some of the other things that happened during that year, they had added seats on in left field for around the grandstands, which would increase the capacity of the park. And Ken talked about Jim Dunn, the owner of the team. He had come in because Charlie Summers, the previous owner, who actually had made a fortune in coal delivery and service, ended up having hard times in the 1914, 1915 era. So even though Summers was one of the ones that had bankrolled the American League, Jim Dunn came and actually rescued the Cleveland market back in those early years. In the 1914, 1915, attendance was terrible. Cleveland was terrible. In fact, they were the worst team in the league in 1914, but they slowly got better when Speaker came in. They improved, and they were in second place in 1918 in a shortened season, second place in 1919 as well. And then the big pennant race that took place in 1920. And I think Ken is going to be back on now. So we will look for him.
Brian, while Ken's getting everything set up, sure. When we traded for Tris Speaker, what did the Indians give up to get Speaker?
Speaker was basically a money deal. He was having money problems with Boston. So they ended up basically getting him, let's see, who did they get for him? But it was mostly because Boston didn't want to pay him. And now Boston, of course, had those money issues later with Babe Ruth. So that's the reason Speaker ended up coming to Cleveland. And then, of course, there is the other issues that they had with Speaker at the time. There was the difference there was like cliques in the different teams between the Catholic group and the Protestant groups. And that actually played a big role in what happened with Chapman and ultimately what happened with the Indians after the death of Chapman. Let's see if Ken is back here. There we go. Let's get up to speed now. No.
There you go.
Okay. Can you all hear me?
We're good.
We're good.
Now I can't.
Completely black. I had to power up everything again.
Okay.
Let's see if we can. Why is this?
Get back to we had the film.
Yep, I'm trying to get there. There
Okay.
we go.
That's it.
There we go. Oops. Back. Okay. back to where we were. Outside of League Park, I was talking about this is June of 1920, the Yankees' first series in. And there was a lot of excitement in Cleveland to come see Babe Ruth and the Yankees. And it turned out to be a three-way pennant race for the whole year between Cleveland, the White Sox, and the Yankees. Here's the Indians warming up in front of their first base dugout. And the Yankees in front of theirs. That's Ruth second from right. That's Gehrig walking towards the camera right now. I take that back. That was not Gehrig. That's a mistake. I'm sorry about that. But there's the Babe. And here's some slow-mo action. This is Tris Speaker taking some batting practice. Great views of League Park here in the background. That would be the Bat Boy, or the mascot as they would call him in those days. That's the press in the front row of the upper deck. 2 rows of seating. Miller Huggins and Tris Speaker, the 2 managers, out for pregame. Now remember, these are edited. This is film over of a couple days. Here's the Yankee dugout on the third base side. So they were there for a couple days, so it's kind of disjointed. They were trying to make a 10-minute film about Babe Ruth and his prowess. You can see the little boy there in the front of the dugout. No public address yet. That's Tom Manning on the megaphone. Warm-ups, and here comes the Babe to the plate. See the packed house. The short porch and right. Look how deep the right fielder is, right in front of that wall. 290 down the line. Look where the first baseman is playing. Way out on the grass. You think shifts are new? No. Been around for a long time. There's some kids trying to see through the cracks in the outfield wall. And there's the Babe with a swing and a miss. He struck out. And I'm sure he has some choice words on his way back to the dugout. There's some fans outside leaving after the game. So the season progresses. As I said, it was a great pennant race, and something big happens actually 100 years ago yesterday.
Yep. Cleveland goes to New York to play at the Polo Grounds. Pitching is the left person on the left. That's Carl Mays. He was known as a submarine-style pitcher. Ball would come up almost from the dirt when he threw the ball. He was kind of a surly type of a player. Didn't get along with a lot of people. He just did his stuff and went home. He also kind of had a reputation, too. He threw high and tight. And back then, of course, nobody had batting helmets. So a lot of the other players in the league did not care for Mays at all. He had been in a dispute when he went to the Yankees that the American League had to settle. So not only was he kind of on the outs with most of the other players in the league, but he was also on the outs with the management of the league. And of course, on the right is Ray Chapman. He was one of the steadfast players of the team. As an infielder, he was a decent hitter, great for sacrifice bunts, very fast. And he was just, was he a 30-year-old or just turning 30?
29 at that point.
Right. And he had just recently been married. And as it turned out, his wife was pregnant at the time of the game that took place. And he was actually thinking about retiring at the end of the season. So they're playing in New York at the Polo Grounds. It's kind of a rainy day, very gloomy day. And he comes up to the plate. Mays throws a pitch high and tight, aims at him. Chapman didn't move, whether he froze or didn't see the ball because the ball had been scuffed up a little bit, dirty. And there was actually kind of a command to the umpires to keep the balls in play because they cost $250, and that was a lot of money back then. So they were trying to keep these balls in play. So he throws the pitch, hits him in the side of the head. Ball ricocheted out. Mays thought he had hit it with the bat. He threw it to first, but Chapman went right down, and pretty much everyone who was at the game there remembered the crack, the sound of the ball hitting his head. And after he did, he went down. The players, they stopped the game, of course. The umpire called for a doctor to come out. And as they were getting Chapman up, he actually got up and he was talking a little bit, but everybody knew he was in bad shape. So they took him to the hospital, and the game, of course, went on. And because they didn't really know how bad he was, other than they knew it was pretty bad. So he ended up going to the hospital. They operated, and it was 4 o'clock, sometime after 4 o'clock in the morning, that he died.
Yeah, clearly one of the most tragic event in the history of Major League Baseball. As Bryan mentioned, they did not wear helmets in those days. There were some players that began wearing an insert to their hat after the incident, but it wasn't until the 50s when that became mandatory, either an insert or a helmet on top of your hat. It really took a while for the change. I think that players in those days looked at it as a badge of courage that they didn't want to wear a helmet. Not much different than hockey for a long time. Dissuaded from wearing the extra protection. But Bryan's right. The delivery style by Mays came into great question. There were a lot of people that really blamed him, said he was throwing at Chapman. In fact, this incident happened 100 years ago. It was mid-August. The Yankees had another trip into Cleveland in September. Mays did not even accompany the team. They were afraid of what the reaction of the Cleveland fans would be. So he stayed behind in New York.
Yeah, his wife, Chapman's wife, was called, of course, after it had happened. So she took a train to New York, but got there after he had passed away. Speaker, it was another kind of an interesting story. Speaker had been Chapman's roommate. They had a room at the Winton Hotel in downtown Cleveland. They had a nice suite there. And so Speaker was a very, very good friend, in addition to being a teammate of Ray Chapman.
Yeah, in fact, Speaker was the best man in the wedding of Chapman and his wife back in October of 19. So as Bryan said, his wife, who was the daughter of the president of East Ohio Gas, obviously from a wealthy family. And Bryan also mentioned that Chapman was considering retiring after this year at age 29, because he knew he had another life if he wanted it. He could have become an executive and gotten involved in the business world. He was a smart guy. He was extremely popular and a tremendous fielder. So certainly something that impacted the sport, the city, and beyond.
Yeah, he was just a very likable guy. He was also a very good player, somebody that was one of the most popular players on the team, even though he may have thought Speaker was the best player or Kovaleski was the best pitcher, but Chapman was a guy that everybody liked.
So Chapman is out. They try Harry Lunte, who was the backup shortstop, and he is actually off to a horrendous start. Really didn't hit at all. A lot of pressure on him, and Cleveland makes a move here, Bryan. Mm-hmm.
So Sewell comes in to Cleveland, and as he had been at Alabama, and was turned out to be the guy who took the place of Chapman. He ended up just thinking of himself as doing what Chapman would do. They really had a lot of doubts about him when he came up, just because he was so new and so fresh and had no experience other than just being a college kid. But he started his Hall of Fame career and helped Cleveland win the pennant that year because of the way he acted, the way he was so cool and calm, and came through in the clutch.
And that wasn't the only move that happened with the team down the stretch. They picked up a key pitcher here as well.
Yeah, this is the Walter Mayles. He was known as the Great Mayles or Duster Mayles. He was kind of a character. He thought of himself as the Great Mayles. And he had been up in the major leagues before, hadn't won a game, was playing out in the Pacific Coast League. And scout said, hey, he's pretty good. So Cleveland picked him up for as a fourth starter for down the stretch. And he was phenomenal. He won 7 games, didn't lose anything, had an earned run average under 2, and certainly pitched the Cleveland team to the pennant because he was the the one that gave him the added depth at the pitching, and was just a phenomenal pitcher that particular season. And even though he had never done well before that.
So the pennant race at this point stays tight. Cleveland goes into a slump right after Chapman dies, but they slump for about a week. They kind of get their act together and make a run and get back to first place. And excitement is really growing in Cleveland. It looks like the Indians are going to have a legitimate shot to make their first World Series. Something else breaks at this time. The 1919 White Sox, who were brought to grand jury, and were charged with throwing the 1919 World Series. That happened right before the last weekend of play. So the eight men out that we hear about were all suspended from play that last weekend. Now Cleveland still won the pennant by 2 games over Chicago, 3 over the Yankees. So there are some people that say, well, Cleveland might not or wouldn't have even won the pennant. Chicago would have had a sweep, probably unlikely. At best, they maybe would have been a tie for first place. But it really doesn't taint the Cleveland season that happened, as some places would lead you to believe. So Cleveland does win the pennant. The city goes absolutely crazy. The World Series is coming to Cleveland. The first 3 games are played in Brooklyn. Cleveland wins the first game over the guy you see right there, Rube Marquard, who was a Cleveland native, now pitching for Brooklyn. Cleveland wins the first game, but the Dodgers win the next 2. So the teams come back to Cleveland for what would be games 4, 5, 6, and 7. It was a best of 9. So had there been an 8th game, it would have gone back to Brooklyn. And interestingly, had there been a 9th, there would have been a flip of the coin for who would have hosted that 9th game. Anyway, game 4, they come back to Cleveland, and Marquard, the Cleveland native, gets into little hijinks.
Yes, he did. Speaking of the Hotel Winton, which is where Tris Speakerly lived, that is where the Brooklyn Dodgers were staying. So that's actually right downtown, right around the corner from Progressive Field, about 11th and Prospect. It is now the Winton Manor Apartments. It was a nice hotel, and of course they had a restaurant there too that was also pretty good, and they had a famous chef there named Chef Boyardee. But on the Saturday morning, the Brooklyn team was in town, and they're at the hotel, and in the lobby, Marquard, who, like we said, is a native Clevelander, he grew up on West 46th Street, he's talking to a gentleman, and he says, oh, by the way, you interested? I have 8 tickets for the World Series if you want, for $350 or some outrageous amount. Unbeknownst to Mr. Marquard, Detective Sukup of the Cleveland Police Department was within earshot. And he said, you are under arrest for ticket scalping. So the guy who had started the first game of the World Series for Brooklyn gets arrested for ticket scalping in Cleveland. And this was on Saturday morning before the first game to be played in Cleveland. So he ends up getting arrested. He appears in court in front of the judge on Monday. And they schedule the trial for Tuesday morning. On Tuesday morning, they have the trial. The police officer testifies. Marquard says, I was just kidding around, joking about it. So I wasn't really serious. And Judge Sam Silbert looked at him and said, well, you're guilty. So I'm going to charge you $1 in court costs. So it cost him $3.80. So not a particularly good day for Rube Marquard. You also see Charlie Ebbets, who was the owner of the Dodgers. He was not real thrilled about what his pitcher was doing. So he said, you're never going to be pitching for me again. So later that year at the league meetings, Marquard gets traded to Cincinnati. The other picture you see is Blossom Seeley. That was Rube Marquard's wife. And she was also having a problem with Rube for another reason, because he was here for the World Series with his new girlfriend. So the week after the World Series was over, Blossom Seeley gets a divorce from Marquard. So all in all, it was not a particularly good time in the life of Rube Marquard, who ended up later in the Hall of Fame.
Blossom Seeley was a Broadway star and singer, so you can look her up. So he had a famous wife. He was a man about town, but Marquard wound up in a lot of trouble here in Cleveland in his hometown. So there was excitement down at the Winton Hotel, but there's also excitement all around the ballpark. This is actually Linwood Avenue, one of the rare pictures we have from around the ballpark. The streets were jammed with people trying to get in. Of course, the tickets were sold out. People were hanging around. There was no TV, no radio at this point, but you can see that certainly there were lots of people around anticipating these games. There's the ballpark itself, a great aerial view. And you can see if you look along what is the wall in right field that runs along the bottom of the picture, there were seats added for the World Series. They actually put some seats atop the wall and sticking out over. There were some seats put in dead center in front of the scoreboard, some extra seating right in front of the bleachers in what was left field if you look along the right side of that picture there. So they were trying to maximize their dollars. In fact, the series was scheduled to begin in Cleveland. Jimmy Dunn went to the owners and the league officers and said, can we delay the start of the World Series a couple of days? Because I'm adding these seats and whatnot. And they said, nope, we're not going to do that, but we'll flip-flop. We're going to start in Brooklyn instead. So that's how games 1, 2, and 3 wound up in Brooklyn, and then back to Cleveland starting with game 4.
And it's also fascinating, too, when you look at that picture, because that's one of the earliest aerial photos of a sporting event that you'll ever see. And that was from the 1920 World Series.
Lots of excitement, as we said, going on outside the ballpark here. Inside, 2 of the greatest Cleveland players ever. That's Napoleon Lajoie on the left, the great Cy Young on the right, and, of course, the player manager for Cleveland Indians in the middle. That's Tris Speaker again. And, of course, you can see on his left sleeve the black armband for Ray Chapman.
And those are when you think about it, not only were they the 3 greatest players in Cleveland baseball history, in all of baseball history.
Very
that
much.
Picture shows 3 of the best players of all time.
Here's a neat view. This disregard the action for a moment. You can see those seats that were added in right center field, the extra seats that go into dead center and in front of the bleachers. Pretty cool view of that. This is the best shot that we've ever come across. This shot has occasionally been used, and they say it is the famous triple play, unassisted triple play by Bill Wamsgans. That is not what this picture shows. Actually, the Indians are at bat in this, so the base runner there is a Cleveland runner. So it certainly isn't Wamsgans, but that conclusion is jumped to on occasion when you see this and you see this picture denoted. But it is it's the Dodgers on defense here. As we said, no radio, no TV. How did you follow the game? Well, here was one way. This is actually in New York. There was a similar setup in Cleveland. There were a couple places around town that they would have this, and they would build scoreboards. Newspaper offices were famous for doing this. It would attract people to their place of business. They would sell more extra papers and get publicity. The game was sent by telegraph, pitch by pitch, what would happen, and they would recreate the game on these scoreboards. They would put little base runners out there. You can see the diamond in the middle. So they would signify if there was a runner on first or whatnot, put up balls, strikes, outs, and thousands and thousands of people would gather around these buildings, and that's how they would follow the game in progress as it happened.
And now you just get on your phone and watch it.
So it gets to game 5. Cleveland has evened the series at 2 games apiece. Game 5 becomes one of the most famous games in baseball history. Three things happen in that game that really set the stage.
This was
you here, right?
Jim Bagby, who was a pitcher, hit a home run. First time a pitcher hit a home run in a World Series. And you get Elmer Smith. Elmer Smith, first time hit a grand slam home run in a World Series game.
And then, of course, the play that
famous one
people talk about the most. This is Wamby. This is Bill Wamsgans. He was the Indian second baseman, and this is a pretty good shot because it really shows kind of how he caught the ball. That it was a liner that he elevated for, caught a line drive with runners on first and second, and turned that unassisted triple play. There have only been, I believe, is it 10 or 15 in baseball
15.
history? I forget right now.
15.
But yeah, this was only the second one ever turned, and it was, of course, the first and only one ever in World Series play. This is a shot of Wamby tagging out the last Brooklyn runner coming from first to second. You can see the runner already on third base down in the lower right-hand corner. He had taken off on the line drive. So Wamby, who caught the line drive, went over, stepped on second, and then the runner at first that also thought the base hit was going to, the ball was going to go through for a base hit. Wamby turns and tags that runner who's stunned. It took, they say, the fans a second to realize what happened. 3 outs on 1 hit ball. And then all things went crazy. And Cleveland came away with an 8-1 victory, took the lead in the series at 3-2.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, too, about Wambsgans is his name. And, of course, the newspaper people did not like it at all. That's why you see his name listed as Wamby, because they didn't want to be typing out Wambsgans and try to fit it into the box score every day. So he became known as Wamby.
And here's a shot from the day after the unassisted triple play. Wamby posing with the 3 victims, the 3 guys that were out on the unassisted triple play. I don't know if they'd get those guys to be able to take that picture nowadays, or they'd be too surly to do that.
Yeah, they probably wouldn't.
So Cleveland goes on to win the World Series 5-2. They win the next 2 games. They don't have to go back to Brooklyn for game 8. Cleveland wins the series 5-2. And in 1921, they come out with some pretty gaudy uniforms with world's champions across the front. This is actually Joe Sewell here modeling the uniform in a colorized shot. Pretty cool. And Cleveland does get its world's championship.
And one of the interesting things, too, about the World Series is the pitching for Cleveland. They win the World Series 5-2. They gave up a total of 8 runs for the whole series. You know, it was just phenomenal pitching.
And Stan Kovaleski leading the way, going 3-0.
Yep.
And I believe he only allowed 2 runs in the 3 games that he pitched, all complete games.
Yeah, incredible stuff.
If you want to follow us, of course, we're going to stay around and talk and answer questions and whatnot, but get our little pitch in. If you're interested in League Park and its history, we post all kinds of things. When we find a new photo, whatnot, anything like that comes up. If it's an anniversary of something famous that happened at League Park, and there are many, many of them that do, join us, follow us on Twitter. If you take the time to scroll back, you'll find all kinds of cool stuff that we've unearthed over the last 5 or 6 years. So take the time to do that. There's my personal Twitter site as well. I post, again, the League Park site is all pertaining to League Park. So I post other things as a former broadcaster and coach and whatnot. And I'm doing a show actually for the Baseball Heritage Museum, which is located at the old League Park site now. So I do a weekly show for them that just started up a couple weeks ago. So if you want to follow me with commentary on sports and whatnot, and there's Brian's Twitter as well. So we have those for you. And if you're interested in the book itself, there's the cover of our book. You can get it through McFarland. I think Eric told us that he was going to put a link to the McFarland site. You can buy it straight from the publisher if you're interested in getting a copy. Tells all of these stories and many, many more in much great detail. So if you're interested in that, and you can also get it if you shop at Amazon or Barnes and Noble or all kinds of bookstores if you're interested in getting a copy of the book. And really, we're pretty proud of what happened with it, because it is really the only comprehensive book with the history of League Park and its many quirks and different stories. In fact, I like to tell the story that our original name for the book was, our working title was In a League of Its Own, because of the inordinate number of things that happened at the ballpark during its history. It really ties into not only, as we mentioned, Federal League, the Black Sox scandal, the debuts of great players, some famous events, of course, about Babe Ruth's 500th home run, and much, much more. Walter Johnson's 3,000th strikeout, Joe DiMaggio's 56th game of his 56-game hitting streak took place at League Park. Many, many great things happened there. It really was a great place. And if you're interested in finding out more about it, clearly the book is a way to go. And it's in lots of libraries too. You don't have to buy it. Pretty much all the local libraries have our book. So let me see if I can stop sharing. Yep, there's the click for that. And we're back. And
So-
Eric, take over there,
Well, thank you.
host.
Thank you both so much for walking us through what is a really amazing season in baseball history and in Cleveland history. I know I personally think it's often forgotten about in terms of when we think about the Cleveland Indians and the franchise. You often don't hear a lot about the 1920 season. It's more 48, probably because it's a little more recent. We have a couple questions. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat feature, and I'll do my best to kind of walk through them all. But I had a couple quick questions for you. One actually just came in. You had mentioned a little bit about the Protestants and Catholics and Chapman, and I think it ties in why he's at Lakeview Cemetery and his wife and daughter are at Calvary Cemetery. Can you go a little bit more in depth into that?
Yeah, back in the day in baseball, there were a lot of cliques, not just on Cleveland, but a lot of the teams. And the Protestant players, a lot of them were the Southern players, and then the Catholic players, like usually the Irish players from the Northeast. Chapman was Protestant, and his wife was Catholic. So what happened is after the beating and he died, the cemetery, the funeral was at St. John's Cathedral. And then, he was buried at Lakeview Cemetery. And the word was that the Protestant players like Speaker, who was one of his good friends, and some of the Catholic players, and there was a big dispute over that, about where the funeral would be. And supposedly there was even like actual fighting between them. And so when Speaker didn't play for a couple of games, and there were some of the other ones, it was because, they'd been in a fist fight over, what was happening to Ray Chapman. And even though it really, it should have been the family's business, period, but they were getting into it because it was the different cliques of the team, the Catholics and pretty much the anti-Catholics on the team then.
And of course, the wife won out. She made the choice, and he did have a Catholic service, but as Eric mentioned, he was buried at Lakeside.
And then, of course, his wife, years later, I believe, committed suicide, and there was a child. The child died of measles. So, I mean, there was tragedy that followed that family as well.
Yeah, the wife it was only about 10 years later, less than 10 years later, that his wife passed, and another year and a half later. So she was just a young girl. She was only 8 or 9 years old when she passed. So certainly a sad story from many respects.
So I'm going to quickly share, my family and I went down to Lakeview yesterday to Chapman's grave, just so you can see what it looks like as of yesterday. For the Indians had placed the image, and then this ball actually up here. If you've never been there, people just drop things off of his gravestone all the time. It actually has his replica of his signature, and then words of the program from his memorial service. So if you get a chance to go to Lakeview, it's a wonderful place to stop by and take a look.
It's kind of an interesting thing too, because it doesn't say on there, baseball player. It just says Raymond Chapman, and when he was born and died.
Certainly in those days, it was common to have an image of a baseball or whatever on someone whose life was tied to the sport, but they didn't do that with Ray.
So you had mentioned the 1919 Black Sox, and John Bonkowski had a question. If that had never broken, if the scandal had never broken at the end of the pennant race, do you believe the Indians would have made it to the World Series? Did that just kind of just break everything apart? What's your take on what might have happened if that news had never broken?
We'll never know for sure. As I said, though, I mean, Cleveland still won the pennant by 2 games. Chicago did play without those players for the last 3 games of the season that weekend. So I guess it's conceivable that I don't remember now if they win. I think they won one of the 2. They would have had to win both of the other, or one of the 3. I think they won, if I remember correctly. So they would have had to win the other 2 games, to force a tie. I don't know if it would have happened. So
Yeah, it's
speculation forever.
Yeah.
Cleveland won, and we'll never know. And and who knows, even before the indictments came out, if they were worried about it then. So, but Cleveland won.
Everyone's going to say when we win it now in 2020, is it tainted because we only played a 60-game regular season?
I don't think it's tainted. I think it'll be a great thing to celebrate in town, right?
I agree.
Yeah.
So Mike Hardy had a question more about League Park, if you don't mind taking one. He had mentioned at League Park today there are large poles and nets on the right field side. Was that and with the screen? Was that where Babe Ruth hit the homer onto Lexington Avenue? Is that where it went over?
It was to right, yes.
Yes.
But that wall that is there now does not extend nearly as far towards center field as the original wall did. That was really the most expensive part of the League Park rebuild project. If you look, there are some huge girders and whatnot, and of course it's a replica. The original wall had the lower 20 feet were solid concrete. Above it were girders that were faced in, and then chicken wire behind those girders, which made for crazy plays off the wall and off the fence and whatnot. So when you get there, yeah, the wall gives you a sense of what it was like, and it's the right height, and it's in the same spot, of course. But when you go there and take a look, imagine that wall did extend almost all the way to center field, the original one.
And then, you think about Babe Ruth, that was the type of home runs that he hit. He wasn't a line drive hitter. You get these towering fly balls. So I think he probably loved hitting the ball way over that fence and breaking a few windows occasionally and seeing how far it went.
Yeah, it's that is such a unique feature of the ballpark, that right field wall that just goes on for miles, and you'd be hard pressed. I mean, think about the Green Monster. It's because that's what we recognize today as a giant wall, and it probably dwarfed that, right?
It's higher. Right?
Well, it's 45 feet. The Green Monster is 37.
Right.
The only wall that was higher was right field at Baker Bowl. That was even closer. It was 280, and I believe that was 60 feet high.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love those old ballparks. So one of the questions I had, and it kind of tied into something I had said earlier about the team and the 1920s. What could we do? What can the Indians do to better honor the heritage of this team? I mean, obviously there are people who are in Heritage Park, but what else could we be doing to make sure that more Clevelanders know about the team and in the legacy that they have in the city?
They've done a lot of statues. Now they haven't done these early guys. Tris Speaker with 792 doubles and the player manager of the first World Series team. I mean, if there's anybody that deserves a statue, I'd say it's him. With Cy Young pretty close behind, although most of his career he did play for Cleveland 1910 and part of 1911. His other years here, which were complete 1890 to 1898, but that was with the Spiders in the National League. So you could make a case that maybe that's not as urgent as putting Speaker in. And Nat Blagier, who predated this 1920 team, I think. He was clearly, along with Ty Cobb, one of the two star players in all of baseball at that time. He'd be someone else that would be deserving of it. Their approach has been that they have, from what I understand, they look at it with who's inside the fence, who's outside the gate, and whatnot. That's an answer for them to come up with. I mean, I will say I don't want to rip the ball club because I think the Indians are a wonderful organization. All owners and teams take some heat at times in their cities. I know I lived in Philly for a while, lived in Baltimore for a while, but I think the Indians do a great job. They've been very supportive of League Park and its renovation and all. They do what's best for their organization. I personally, yeah, I hope they honor those guys at some point. But again, if you go into Jacobs or Progressive Field nowadays, if you walk around when we get a chance again, the concession area on the back of the lower deck just to the third base side of home plate. If you look closely, you'll see there are bricks and arches, and there's a whole area that's dedicated to the early teams. There are things celebrating the players. There's a couple plaques put up about some of the famous happenings at League Park. So they are very aware of their history. They do a wonderful job. The Heritage Park is a great area. I know they dearly would like to have an indoor museum as well. I don't know if any of you have been, but St. Louis has a great one. The Mets have a great area in their new ballpark. I know the Indians would like to do that. It's a matter of when they can get the funding and find the right location and whatnot. But they do have a full-time historian now who saves artifacts and has been researching, Jeremy Fedor, who does a lot of neat things. And, so they have an eye on doing something greater at some point. We'll see what happens.
Some of the other ones, teams have done more stuff too. Like I know Ken has been to Atlanta, their new stadium, and they do have a wall basically of the history of the Braves. And St. Louis has, as he said, and the Reds have a museum attached to the ballpark. So it's just finding the space, time, and I'm sure they would love to do that. But until that happens, I think the Indians are probably going to concentrate more on the players that, the people here know about and have remembered, and that's like Feller and Tomey and those players from the World Series. So, they will if they can, and it would be a great thing if they did.
I mean, let's face it, if there's a Jim Tomey bobblehead night, that's going to draw more people than a Napoleon Lajoie bobblehead night. It's the fact. People know more recent players and whatnot, and so the promotion does tend to be that way. It's a shame that what happened this year, because there was supposed to be a weekend celebrating the 1920 team that was on their promotional schedule. That got, of course, washed out with all these things going on. It's disappointing. And then even this past weekend was a celebration of 100 years of Negro League Baseball in Major League Baseball, and that was supposed to happen at the end of June. And that got pushed to this weekend and, really overshadowed the 100th anniversary of Chapman's death. Had that Negro League celebration gone on when it was scheduled in June, I'm sure there was some pretty good attention. We tweeted a lot of things out yesterday that were written and whatnot, but I think there would have been even more had it not gone head to head with the Negro League celebration that did occur in baseball this year.
That makes complete sense. And actually I had that conversation with my daughter earlier this weekend. So had a couple more questions that came in. Was there ever any memorial to Addie Joss when they played at League Park? Similar to the one that was that was a Chapman that they put in storage.
Talking about the plaque?
Like a plaque, yeah. Any sort of memorial.
Not aware of any plaque that was ever done. Obviously, the famous game that was done in his honor, and that's really what's talked about in 1911, precursor of the All-Star game that was played here.
And then is there any truth that Speaker taught Larry Doby how to play center field?
Well, Speaker was a coach. Very interesting. If you ever get a chance to watch The Kid from Cleveland, the awful movie that was made after the Indians won the World Series in '48, came out in late '49. There are clips. You can see Speaker in there. Of course, Doby was on the team. I mean, I would be pretty sure that he had something to say to Doby. I know there was when Doby was first up with the club, I know there was a fly ball that he missed and went off his head, and he took some grief for that. But he turned out to be obviously a pretty doggone good player.
Yeah, it was pretty remarkable. Just some of the first that happened in Cleveland with some of the racial barriers that were broken with Larry Doby as the first American League player, and then Frank Robinson as the first African American manager of a team. It's pretty amazing. Yeah. Couple questions that came in about actually a book I was going to mention in the conclusion, The Pitch That Killed. It's a really deep dive into this season and all the dynamics that went into it. What were your thoughts on that book? There you go.
That's right here. Very, very good book. It's a very good read if you're interested in the topic, and it's a fun book to read too. I mean, it's one of those where you learn stuff and you also enjoy reading it. And one of those where you can't put it down. Very good book.
That was the baseball book of the year it came out. I want to say about 89 or so. And the rights to it were held by one company. Somebody else just picked this up. This was news within the last couple of weeks about a potential documentary or film or something based on it and based on the Chapman story and the story of the 20 Indians. Of course, we would all love to see that. We'll see if it comes to fruition.
Yeah, most definitely. The introduction is pretty powerful when they talk about his funeral and how St. John's was just packed, and there were thousands of people outside trying to get in, and they couldn't, and the streets were lined for Chappie's funeral. It's a pretty powerful opening part of that book, for sure.
Yeah, as great as much as sports gets our attention nowadays, it's a spread out attention. There's so many things going on, and so many sports that are at a high level, and and plus lots of other endeavors for people to be in. Baseball back then was by far and away king, and horse racing got a lot of attention because you could bet on it. Boxing got a lot of attention at that point, but as far as the traditional team sports, baseball was really head and shoulders ahead and above at that point. And so the Chapman's death, it can't be underestimated how that impacted not only the club, of course, but the city as well.
And then I guess one final question. It's again going back to the All-Star game for Addie Joss. Do you mind just doing a quick recap what that was like? Because I know that was a monumental thing for Cleveland at that time. Do you mind just sharing a little bit about that?
On the Joss All-Star game?
Yeah.
Addie Joss in 1911 had died of tubercular meningitis right before the season started. Another very popular player, was a very, very good pitcher, died right before the season started. And what they did was they decided to have an all-star game for the benefit of his family. And so they picked a date in the middle of the season when all but two of the teams in the American League were playing. And Cleveland hosted it and played against the all-stars from the rest of the American League. And so there was great players in it: Walter Johnson, Ty Cobb, Eddie Collins. And of course, the interesting thing about Ty Cobb was he ended up wearing a Cleveland uniform because he lost his, or it was stolen, or something happened to it on the way down to Cleveland. So they raised about $13,000 for his family, which was a ton of money. It was, imagine like a double of a normal player's salary for a year. They raised that for him. Everybody time. Cobb was actually trying to be very nonchalant and quiet about it, but they said, no, it's important that you say you're helping and participating and donating because that would mean something. And so they all did, and it was a great event, and it was actually probably the first real all-star game in baseball history.
Well, thank you for sharing that, for sure. I mean, having the all-star game here last year was one of the reasons we did the program down at League Park last summer, was because of that fact with that all-star benefit for the Joss family. So
I hope we can be in person the next time, because we won't have a screen go blank like mine did in the middle of the presentation. It's much better to be there in person.
Very much so. And for those who have not been down to League Park, it really is an amazing place. You can feel the echoes of history there, and the museum is pretty neat. I think they actually have Ray Chapman's, I think they have his sweater, if I remember correctly. So it's pretty neat. Bryan and Ken, thank you so much for being here this evening. We really appreciate
one thing before we go.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of League Park, obviously the last game of the World Series was the last baseball game that year at League Park. But League Park also then hosted football. And there was the Cleveland Tigers in the professional league, and a local college named St. Ignatius was having their first year of football. So within 2 weeks of the last game of the World Series, they played their first home football game at League Park against the University of Dayton. And of course they won, but that was to be expected.
One other thing I would add is if anyone posts questions or comments after the fact to this, I'll certainly check back in. I'm sure Bryan will too. So if you didn't get your question answered, do you think of something later or whatever, if you want to post something there, in the comments beneath this show, we'd be happy to try and respond. Also, again, there's the Twitter site and whatnot. And one more little commercial. If you are a member of a church group or Italian American club or whatever it is, we've done presentations on the history of League Park at all kinds of different places, and it's kind of a fun night. So if you're looking for a speaker or speakers for some kind of a group you might be involved with, or someone that might be looking for somebody like that, please suggest us. You can obviously tweet to us or whatnot, or get hold of us through Eric. Is easy to get hold of us as well if you have something like that. We really enjoy doing it, and we've been all over the northern half of the state and would like to continue.
Well, your passion for Cleveland baseball and League Park definitely shows, and as I said, we're really fortunate to have you within our John Carroll community, and your willingness to share your knowledge with all of us. And we definitely look forward to Bryan's book on John Carroll basketball coming out pretty soon, right?
Yes, it should be pretty soon. They have the proofs. They're going over those right now. It'll be going to print. So check the John Carroll Athletic website. It should be within the next couple of weeks. Hopefully they will have something posted about it. A lot of funny stories, a lot of good stories, a lot of interesting stories in that. So
great.
Oh, and let me chirp in one other thing about the Baseball Heritage Museum. Eric said how great it is, a spot. You can support that museum as well. I'm doing a weekly show that started recently, kind of a guest, and then chat about baseball. So there's lots of ways to get involved other than even going down there. You can certainly follow the museum and the things they're doing online. So, keep that in mind as well as another source and another, pretty cool thing that's going on. That's Baseball Heritage Museum. They do most of their stuff through their Facebook page.
So what I'm going to do is, once we process the video from tonight's recording, we will post it to YouTube, and I will send an email out to all of you who joined us and those who registered with the link, as well as links to how you can get their League Park book, to the Baseball Heritage Museum. So you have a quick way to get access to all these different resources that we were talking about tonight. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. I know it's getting late. It's about 9 o'clock on the East Coast, but we're really happy that you did join us, and we hope that you enjoyed it. Before I let you go, I want to let you know about a couple other programs that our office and the university is putting on. Tomorrow night, we launch our fall semester for the Alumni Continuing Education Series. You've probably seen it called A.C.E.S. It's actually, tomorrow is another centennial milestone, as Tennessee became the 36th state to ratify the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. So we will have one of our professors talking about women's suffrage. We actually have a kids program that will be on demand, as well as a adult program later tomorrow evening. We also will have other programs, including a program on space exploration with alumnus and astronaut Carl Walls, an in-depth look into how we honor our history, specifically the Confederacy with monuments and names of forts, the beauty of life and the resurrection in art, and then finally, something I know we're all paying attention to, the 2020 election. And that one will be featuring CBS political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns from the class of 2009. You can register for all these programs or learn more about them at jcu.edu/alumni. The registration for the majority of these programs should be up by the end of the week. Thank you again. We look forward to having you join us for another program in the near future, and please stay safe. Have a wonderful evening.